What if I told you that for thousands of years money didn't jingle? It didn't fold, and it certainly didn't live on a screen. Before the first coin was ever struck, humanity devised ingenious, beautiful, and sometimes downright bizarre ways to trade and store wealth. From shells that crossed continents to money you could literally eat. This is the story of the currencies that built our world. Join us as we uncover 20 fascinating facts about money before coins. Let's start with a currency born from the sea. Imagine a form of money so successful it was used across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific Islands for centuries. I'm talking about cowrie shells. These small, glossy shells were nature's perfect coin. Durable, nearly impossible to counterfeit, and small enough to be portable. They paid for everything from daily groceries to bride prices. In parts of Africa, they were still in use as late as the 20th century, a testament to their enduring value. The next time you see a seashell, remember that its humble cousin once powered global trade. Now think of the most common seasoning in your kitchen. Could you imagine it being worth more than gold? For the Roman Empire, salt was exactly that. It was so precious that it was used to pay soldiers. That payment was called a salarium argentum, which is the origin of our modern word salary. Salt wasn't just a flavoring, it was a critical preservative, allowing food to be stored and armies to march. Entire trade routes, like the famous Via Salaria in Italy, were built just to transport this white gold. It was a currency that was literally worth its salt, from the savory to the sweet. In the bustling markets of the Aztec and Mayan empires, the currency of choice was chocolate, specifically cocoa beans. These precious beans were used to buy everything from a turkey to a canoe. They were so valuable that taxes were paid in them, and counterfeiters would carefully craft fake beans out of clay, scooping out the valuable insides. So, the next time you enjoy a piece of chocolate, remember that its ancestors were once the lifeblood of Mesoamerican economies, a currency you could both spend and savor. What if your money was too heavy to carry? On the remote island of Yap in Micronesia, they solved this with rhinestones. These were massive, circular limestone discs, some weighing more than a car. Instead of physically exchanging them, the entire community simply kept a mental ledger of who owned which stone. A stone could change hands while remaining in the same spot for generations. Its value came from its size, its history, and the difficulty of its journey from a distant island. It was a physical currency that operated on pure social trust, a kind of ancient public blockchain. Our next currency is both money and a message. For the Native American tribes of the Northeast, wampum was the medium. These were intricate belts and strings made from polished seashells, most often the purple and white parts of the quahog clam. Wampum wasn't just for buying goods, it was used to record history, seal treaties, and convey diplomatic messages. Each pattern and color held deep meaning. When Europeans arrived, they adopted wampum as currency, but they often missed its profound cultural significance. It was a currency that literally spoke. Can you imagine brewing your savings? In the vast, cold landscapes of Tibet, Siberia, and Mongolia, you could. For centuries, compressed tea bricks were a standard form of currency. Tea was harvested, dried, and pressed into dense blocks, which were easier to transport than loose-leaf tea. These bricks were incredibly versatile. They could be used to buy horses or tents, but if times were tough, you could chip a piece off, add hot water, and have a nourishing drink. It was a practical, edible, and highly valued form of money on the Silk Road. In West Africa, money wasn't just kept in a pocket, it was worn. During the height of the trade with European merchants, bronze and copper bracelets called manillas became a dominant form of currency. These horseshoe-shaped bangles were produced in Europe and traded for goods like spices, ivory, and tragically enslaved people. Their value varied based on their metal composition and design. They were a powerful symbol of wealth, functioning as both personal adornment and a standardized unit of exchange, a truly wearable asset. Before coins were standardized, how did you pay for something with precious metal? You hacked it. Vikings and Celts, among others, used a system called hack silver. They would take silver objects, jewelry, plates, ingots, and simply chop them into smaller pieces. These bits were then weighed on a scale to make a payment. It was a brutally practical system. An ornate bracelet wasn't just an ornament, it was a portable bank account, ready to be hacked apart to settle a debt or buy a new sword. It was payment by the piece. Long before paper banknotes, there were grain receipts. In the Fertile Crescent of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, grain was the ultimate measure of wealth. Farmers would deposit their harvests of wheat and barley into state or temple-controlled granaries for safekeeping. In return, they received clay tablets or papyrus receipts that recorded the amount. These receipts could then be traded for other goods and services, functioning just like early banknotes. The temple vaults were the first banks, and their wealth was rooted in the harvest. Think of the sharpest natural material known to ancient man. In Mesoamerica, this material was obsidian. This volcanic glass could be fractured to create a cutting edge far sharper than steel. For civilizations like the Aztecs and Maya, obsidian wasn't just for making razor-sharp weapons and surgical tools. It was a high-value trade item, controlled by the elite and transported over long distances. Quarries were jealously guarded, and the finest blades were a form of currency, traded like precious gems. It was a currency with a deadly edge. We often think of gold as the ultimate symbol of wealth, but in two very different parts of the world, another stone reigned supreme. In both ancient China and among the Olmec and Maya of Central America, jade was considered more precious than gold. Its hardness and luminous green color were associated with eternity, spiritual power, and royalty. It was carved into ritual objects, jewelry, and burial suits for emperors. Its value wasn't just material, it was sacred. Owning jade meant you held a piece of heaven itself. Imagine a spice so valuable it was known as black gold and was used to pay rent, taxes, and dowries. That spice was black pepper. Originating from the Malabar coast of India, peppercorns were a global obsession. They were small, durable, and in high demand across the Roman Empire and medieval Europe. Alaric the Goth famously demanded thousands of pounds of pepper as part of the ransom for Rome in 410 AD. Entire fortunes were made and lost in the spice trade, all driven by this tiny, pungent currency. Before the perfectly round coins we know, metal currency came in much stranger shapes. Across the ancient world, from the Mediterranean to China, people traded with standardized metal ingots. But these weren't just boring bars. Some were shaped like ox hides, indicating they were worth one ox. Others were shaped like axes or knives. These shapes served as a visual guarantee of their weight and value, a precursor to the ruler's face being stamped on a coin. It was money that declared its own value through its form. Imagine a currency made of tiny, colorful swirls of glass. For centuries, this was a reality. Venetian glass beads crafted with secret techniques on the island of Murano became a major form of currency, especially in Africa and the Americas. Their vibrant colors and intricate patterns were unlike anything locally available, making them highly desirable. European traders used these beads to acquire gold, ivory, and other resources. These tiny pieces of art connected continents and fueled global trade networks, one beautiful bead at a time. You're wearing a form of ancient wealth right now. Across the globe, from the intricate kente cloth of the Ashanti kings in Ghana to the tapa bark cloth of Polynesia, textiles have long served as currency. The quality of the weave, the rarity of the dyes, and the complexity of the pattern all determined its value. Cloth was used to pay tribute, seal alliances, and display social status. It represented a huge investment of time, skill, and resources, a beautiful and functional form of woven wealth. We've already discussed salt as a salary, but in ancient China they took it a step further. Under the Tang dynasty, The state created a monopoly on salt and began minting compressed bricks of it. These salt cakes were stamped with official seals and circulated just like coins. This created a literal salt standard, allowing the government to control a crucial commodity and use it as a stable state-backed currency. It was money you could trust, regulated by the emperor himself. How did people keep track of credit before writing was common? With a simple piece of wood. In medieval Europe, the tally stick was a brilliant and surprisingly secure accounting tool. A stick would be notched to represent the amount of a debt. It was then split lengthwise. The creditor kept one half, the debtor the other. Because the grain of the wood and the notches were unique, the two halves would only match each other, creating a tamper-proof record of the transaction. It was the original credit system, simple yet genius. Before banks, the most reliable investment was one that could walk. In pastoral societies all over the world, wealth was measured in livestock. Cattle, sheep, goats, and camels weren't just sources of food and materials, they were the primary form of capital. They reproduced, creating more wealth over time. In fact, the Latin word for money, pecunia, comes from pecus, meaning cattle. These were the original liquid assets, a living, breathing, and moving form of currency. How do you make a tiny payment with a huge gold nugget? You don't. Before gold was minted into coins, merchants used gold dust. They would carry fine, portable scales to meticulously weigh out the exact amount needed for a transaction. From the markets of West Africa to the gold fields of California, gold dust and tiny nuggets were a standard way to settle accounts. It required trust and a steady hand, but it allowed the universal value of gold to be used for even the smallest purchases. Finally, we arrive at the invention that changed everything. Around 600 BCE, in the Kingdom of Lydia in modern-day Turkey, the world's first known coins were minted. They were made from electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, and stamped with a design, often a lion's head, to guarantee their weight and purity. This innovation was revolutionary. It created a standardized, portable, and government-backed form of money that supercharged trade across the Mediterranean and beyond. The coin was born, and the world of finance would never be the same. From salt and shells to stones and sticks, the history of money is the history of human ingenuity. Each of these ancient currencies tells a story about what a culture valued, how they trusted one another, and how they built their world. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through time. If you found this fascinating, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.